Well, you guessed it. On today's episode of El Camino Kyle, we're going to be On today's episode of El Camino Kyle, we're going to be rebuilding the 68 Mercury Cougar's C4 transmission for the second time this week. Let's get right into it. Alright, I'm going to show you guys what my problem is right after I guess I will show you it. Right after I fire it up for the first time this morning. As you can see, we'll get into why that blew up my transmission. So, it's about 34 degrees and 6 a.m. Sunday morning. And I'm about to wake up Noah's whole family starting this thing up. Ready? Alright, I'm gonna shift it into gear. Hold on. Alright, I'm gonna shift it into gear. Don't worry, I don't need oil pressure because this thing's blowing up anyway. And because quite frankly, it ain't going anywhere. So, I'll take off my e-brake because I've been using that, treating it like a manual. So we're in park, right? Watch the RPMs. Drop, we're in gear, right? Nothing. Neutral, of course we won't get anything. Drive, idle changes again. Nothing. Second. Nothing. First. Nothing. So, all my gears drop idle like they're, in gear, because they are in gear, but we ain't going anywhere because it feels like there's an e-brake on, but of course the e-brake isn't on. I know it's not a problem with my brakes. You guys will say, oh, your brake light's on, dumbass. Well, that's for the distribution block. I haven't gotten to fixing that yet. I like how my brakes feel like a rock. Anyway, I think I determined it to the parking pawl, if you guys know what that is. It's basically a little guy that when you go into park, of course, your gears stop, and then sometimes you'll realize that you roll about a foot forward, and then you kind of shake a little bit because there's this little rod, or it's different in every car, but this rod or hammer-like thing basically clicks into the, in between your gear teeth, and that's what locks it. And that's also why when you're parked on a hill and you gotta shift out of park, that's why it's so hard. So I think that is permanently engaged. And yeah. So now I'm just gonna get out of the car and show you everything that we're gonna need to rebuild this thing, because I've already done it once. So I believe I can tell you verbatim what we're gonna need, but don't hold me accountable. First things first, you're going to want a soggy, wet, muddy piece of plywood to lay on, because I don't like rocks. Alright, so right here I have gathered all the essentials that we're going to need. Starting off with basically 4.5 quarts of trans fluid. I forgot to get some new stuff this morning, So I'm just going to use the old ones that were in the car for 15 years. Should be all good. I'm not going to filter it, not going to check it for particles or whatever. Put it in these dirty old mason jars. Will work just fine. I'm going to need a transmission funnel. Going to need a jack and some jack stands, of course. Lots of rags. We're going to need a catch pan, which I also forgot. Something to put the fluid in, so mason jars, of course. We need a socket wrench, probably a breaker bar as well. I grabbed myself a mallet for getting that pan off, if yours was stuck like mine after 15 years. We're going to need an adapter drive. I've got that on my breaker bar. I got myself a swivel socket joint. Gonna need probably as many feet of extensions as you can. That'll get you to China, because we're gonna have to reach deep in there. Yeah, we got our mallet for our transpan. We're gonna need a poker stick to get that parking pawl back, or you could use your flathead screwdriver. We'll probably use the flathead for our speedometer cable housing. We got to pry that guy out. Yeah, we already got our swivel joint. We're going to need a 3/8 wrench for our speedometer cable bracket bolt. We're going to need a 1/2-inch wrench for our Ford drive shaft U-bolt bolt heads. Also for our transmission snout bolts, there should be about 6 of those, and then also for our transpan, but we'll probably use a socket for that guy. So yeah, you're going to need a socket for the snout bolts as well when we have to reach deep in there for the pan, and then we're going to need a 9/16 wrench for the transmission crossmember bolts. Preferably a ratcheting short one and a long one. That just makes it a little bit easier on yourself. And then we're going to need a 17mm socket for the trans bushing to cross member bolts. And then a 19mm socket for our trans bushing to snout bolts. The last thing, if you also want shackles for your rear so you can blow up your transmission, you can go to hell. You'll find those there. And, oh yeah, one other thing. You could also use that to basically hook it to your front axle and tow your piece of shit all the way to the junkyard and get rid of it. That's, of course, optional. I'll probably use that towards the end of the video, so just wait for that. And I'm going to get this thing up on jack stands, and we're going to get right into it. Okay, so now that I've got this thing up on stands, I'm going to do a little talking part over me, I guess, taking the whole thing apart. Hopefully the clip of me taking it apart doesn't run too long. If it does, I'll throw in a clip of me dancing or, I don't know, something else. But okay, now that we've got the fluid drained out of it, I'm gonna start with working my way to taking the snout off. So I'm probably gonna take these bushing to cross member bolts out, and then I'll take the bushing bolts out, and then I'll put pressure on the transpan so it's not having any stress on it, and then I'll probably take the drive shaft off. Then I'll disconnect the throttle cable, or the speedo cable, and the snout housing bolts. My bad, it's an 18mm. So on Monday, I installed the lifting shackles on the rear so I could fit those 275s in place of the, I think it was 215s that I had. Yeah, so I installed those. The reason why I went with the lifting shackles, although you guys told me specifically not to, was because I looked into getting rear lifting springs or just stock replacement springs, I guess. And I found one place that a few of you guys recommended on Facebook and Reddit. All in all, with the eye bolts, the U bolts, new shackles, regular shackles, with the springs, I was going to go with a 1-inch lifting spring. Those were going to be $460 with shipping because they were coming from Georgia or something. So that's obviously not going to happen. So I put these shackles on to test. I mean, for research purposes only, right? That's why we're making this video at the end of the day, because I was just doing it for research purposes only. So I'll probably now order those leaves, or maybe try lifting blocks. I feel like lifting blocks would be a better thing to try over those shackles, because for one, the shackles hit my exhaust tip anyway. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm probably the only one that would realize it. So I'm not really a fan of that. Plus, I don't know, I feel like I'd gain more handling back using lifting blocks, although I got more handling and more grip with those tires. The thing won't even do a burnout now. So now that you guys know that I put lifting shackles on there, don't forget to leave some hate in the comments down below. I love seeing that. And when you're scrolling down to the comment section, make sure you hit that subscribe button as you pass by it, because these views don't pay for themselves. Yeah, these views pay for my stupidity, basically, at the end of the day. Anyway, I took it for a drive after installing the shackles, and the tires didn't rub or anything. So I came back here and parked it on like a minor, nearly flat decline. I'll throw up a photo. So I could go clean up the garage after I was done working and go home. So I did. Then I started the car. It shifted into gear just like it did in this morning. Shifted into gear. Idle dropped in all gears like it should have. But it felt like the e-brake was on. It was making the car not move after basically giving it throttle. So yeah, you saw that it didn't really want to budge. I even tried rocking it back and forth, and yeah, it'd go for like a foot, and then it'd just rock back and forth because it is that parking pole. So I put it up on all fours and tried it, nothing. I also tried it in all gears, nothing. Put it in neutral and tried spinning the drive shaft. It was locked. The tire would spin by hand, and the other wheel would counter rotate in all the gears because it's a non-posi, of course, it's a one leg. It just wouldn't move, and it wouldn't even move in park. So I thought it was the parking pole because the torque converter flex plate bolts didn't snap, the trans fluid didn't smell burnt, and it was topped off. The axle or the diff wasn't broken because the tires turned. Drive shaft yoke wasn't too deep or too shallow in the trans because it's got no room to move because it's basically bolted to the 8-inch, the 4 to 8 inch differential yoke, I guess you could call it. So I dropped the pan. There was no metal in the pan. I dropped the filter. No metal in the filter. I took off the transmission snout to do this. Pulled the snout off of the end of my C4 automatic 3-speed transmission that's going on a 68 Mercury Cougar. I was messing around with this guy right here that moves back and forth, and this guy slides to the side, and this one goes there. Then this rod fell out. If I can get that out, like that, fell out, came off. There's a little, looks like a shaft would go in there. So my question is, does that guy way back there, right above that guy, that rod, does it slide into this piece? So I ended up putting that little rod, that's the parking pole, back into that, I guess you could call it cusp. And that afternoon, I put it back on the ground, and then when all fours landed, it started rolling down the driveway even though it was in park. I topped off the fluid, I let it warm up, shifted through all the gears, Made sure the pump was sucking and pumping. I checked the fluid 3 more times, and it drove. Well, it had reverse, neutral, first, second, third. But in park, it just rolled, and it was hard-ish shifting the lever from park to reverse. So in park, I treated it like a manual and just put on the e-brake. I drove it like that night, to and from work, Saturday morning. And then I drove it from work Saturday night to Noah's Christian prom. And then I drove it to Noah's house, all fine. After the prom, I went down the highway going like 60 or 70. I was going easy on it. I may have been going Mach 12, Mach 13, but that's not the point. I went to leave his house after we ate some pie, and the same thing as Monday. The same exact problem. It just wouldn't shift into gear. It's basically what I showed you this morning was what happened last night. That was just about 6 hours ago now. And now we're back to square one. So here I am at like 7 a.m. fixing the same problem for probably not the last time. You saw that I know exactly the tools that I need. But I am filming this, so it's probably going to take a little bit longer. Yeah, so will it get done? Probably not. By the way, I think that I've decided that I'm going to try and print some stickers that look like the El Camino Kyle in the intro clip. I'll see if I can throw up a photo of that on screen. You'd be able to get those by DMing me or emailing me. I'll look into getting designs up if they show up on screen. I've probably ordered them, so you could get them. Find out how to get those in the description. Yeah, so thanks, boys. Yep, I'm gonna have to make a new one. Great. Only got 2 days out of that. So our cone is off. So put that aside and wipe this down. Let it leak everywhere. And then I'm carefully going to take my gasket off the transmission case as easy as I can. But it broke because it's easiest if you kind of piece this guy together piece by piece so you know exactly where your brackets are. But I guess I'm going to get to show you guys how to make your own gasket. So I picked up just a sheet of this gasket stuff. It has cork in it. Hopefully it has another. Damn. It had this type of material. Only one sheet of it, so I'm probably going to have to run to O'Reilly's right now and get more of it. But it's, what is that, like a 12 by 12. I only used that much of it. Hold on to this stuff if you need to make more gaskets, but let's see if I can use this. This might be the same material. Just thicker. Alright, we're gonna go run to O'Reilly's and get a new piece. Alright, Noah and I just took a trip to O'Reilly's to get more gaskets because in my little pack here they had 2 sheets of cork, a thick and a thin, and then they had the blue foamy, I think it's like a low dense gasket, and then they just had 1 sheet of this high density gasket, but I already chopped that up to make this one. So I had to go buy a new pack. O'Reilly's didn't have any, but we took our old battery cores, and they give you $10 for each core. No questions asked. You can take 5 a day, and they'll give you a little O'Reilly's gift card. So if you guys got any cores, go do that. But went over to the very low grade Napa and got some high density gasket. I got a sheet of 12 by 20. I was hoping that I could. Oh, did it really just? See, Napa puts tape on their crap, and then the gasket just falls apart. Great. So I was hoping that I could get 2 sheets of this. It's rolled up, which is garbage. It's going to make it even more difficult. Yeah, I might be able to make 2 gaskets when this breaks again. Alright, we're going to have to flatten that out somehow. But what I was saying earlier is I saved as much of the gasket as I could from, let's see how this goes, from this morning, because it kind of serves as a template. So I've got basically 3/4 of it, and then I think this piece goes like that. So I could use that as a template, and I've also got my pieces from the first time that it blew up, so that will also help me out. Let's see, I've got almost a full gasket here, but I'll show you how to do it basically without that. So yeah, I'm going to peel all the gasket off, and then we'll put this snout face down and see if we can do that. Alright, so I got a flat X-Acto knife blade, and I carefully went around the edge, getting all that old gasket off, trying not to gouge the metal, because that'll make it leak. You can see there's a few places left with gasket still on there, but that's fine. Just if you go over it with your finger, make sure that basically you can't even feel it. So I'm pretty good there. I'm confident with that. So what we're going to do next is get our gasket sheet and lay it down on the table, make an area for ourselves, just like that. And then hopefully it'll hold that in place. And the little bit of remaining trans fluid will probably seep down and kind of make its own line around it. So when we take it off, it'll probably make a little imprint to help us know where we're at. So we're going to start cutting out the outside. Just get an X-Acto knife. Probably put this blade back in. Okay, I think I've scored all the way across it, so we'll take our pan off. Pan, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, we got a little bit of fluid somewhere. That's alright, we're going to cut out the center of it. It doesn't really matter. But you can kind of see where I scored around the outside of it. So we're going to go ahead and cut that out. Okay, we got that all cut out, and it looks like if this does end up breaking again, I can use this sheet for another one. But I think Napa is garbage, and this gasket proves that. Really bad gasket. Not happy with how it's turning out. So yeah, looks like we've got the right area for it. Okay, I've got it squared up now underneath the snout. You know, I'm not really a fan of this gasket, but what I'm gonna do to kind of help myself out is I'm gonna take a knife and I'm gonna score each hole in here so I know where it is. I'm gonna poke a few points around the area of the bolt hole so I know the edge of the circle. Okay, you guys probably can't see it here, but I've marked a few circles here, or points for each hole. So basically I'm gonna make a cross in between the top and the bottom one, side to side. And then basically I'm just gonna do a whole bunch of crosses at every angle so it makes like a spider web. That'll make it easy for me to cut it out. Alright, so it took a little longer than expected cutting out these bolt holes, because Noah and I are looking at getting a 67 Thunderbird up in Port Orchard, which is about 3 or 4 hours away. Gonna send my uncle to go look at that for me on Saturday. So I'll keep you guys updated with that, probably on my Instagram. So go follow me if you haven't already. But all my bolt holes line up, so I'm gonna get a little bit infertile by drinking some Mountain Dew, and we're gonna cut out the inner gasket face. So, lined up my bolt holes with every bolt. They should go in flush. Now I'm grabbing my old gasket and I'm lining it up over those bolt holes, and then I'm scoring it with a knife, because that's going to be easier than trying to do it just up against the metal that's under the gasket. So I got a pretty sharp knife here. Going to do my radius. So now I'll grab my next piece, make sure the bolt holes are square. Let's see. Line it up just like that. Okay, then I'll go along this large radius. Okay, so now I've got just the right side to do. Let's see if I've got a piece for that. Let's see. This guy go here. Looks like it does. So let's score that. It's to that point. Alright, I just tore the gasket on the home stretch.
It's not holding much pressure.
Yeah, it is holding pressure. That's not enough. Alright, I'm gonna still use it. I don't recommend doing what I'm gonna do, but I'll put a dab of RTV. I'll let that tack up and I'll put it right in that corner. I know you guys are gonna hate that, but I'm gonna do it because they ain't going too well today. You know? Alright, let's get back into it. Alright guys, I'm gonna do the best job that I can filming this. I got the GoPro in one hand, my phone in one hand, and I brought my phone up. Okay, so as you guys saw in the video clip that I put in earlier in the video, I was messing with this guy. It fell out. This is part of the parking pole. There's this rod that moves horizontally. This guy moves back and forth, and then there's a little rod with, I guess, a cusp attached to it that just slides out if I can get it up. Yep, right there. You can see the cusp there. It's on a bevel. And then up there in the back, let me grab my poker. I think you saw it in the video, but there's a little rod right there. So I'm gonna switch to my phone so I can get a video of what happens. So I'll be right back. Okay, so you can see our little parking pole rod right there. So Noah, it's in park right now, right? So shift it into neutral. And you can see that it just shrinks back into the casing. So I can see you guys can't go into one more back, Noah. Okay, go back into neutral. Reverse. Okay, so reverse is kind of the midpoint in between park and neutral. So how I did it last time is I had Noah fiddle in between reverse and neutral to try and get this cusp on there because it won't go on in park. So that's the difficulty of it. I really can't record that. I need probably 3 hands. I don't have that, but I've got 3 legs. So I'm going to have to catch up with you guys after I get done with that, and I'll show you what we come up with. Alright guys, so I think this might be the end of this video because I went to realign it and that pin just disappeared. Probably dropped hopefully down into the pan, but there is a little iron block or aluminum block, just some piece of metal block right here above the pan that it's probably on top of. So the pin's gone. I tried everything, I can't fish it out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the snout back on. We're gonna put the cross member back on so the transmission isn't having force on itself. Drop the pan, see if it's in there. I don't think it will. And then gonna see what I can do. I'm gonna think on it for a few days, scratch my head, do some research, and then maybe even pull the transmission and take it to someone professionally. And you know, I shot my shot, right? So let's get this snout back on.
There's no way that you could come from my loins. Soon as I get home, the first thing I'm gonna do is punch your mama in the mouth.